What is a Nazi? Understanding the current American political structure. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, NSDAP, controlled the country, Germany, which they transformed into a dictatorship. Under Hitler's rule, Germany quickly became a totalitarian state where nearly all aspects of life were controlled by the government. Here is a map of the areas controlled by Nazi Germany in 1942. Here is another map of the area Nazi controlled. These maps will vary from publication to publication, but this gives a good idea of the reach of the Nazi. Nazism, formerly known as National Socialism, National Socialismus. Nazi, the true meaning is often misunderstood. It is the banner given to a social system. It is not a person, it is a system. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, National Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or NSDAP. This is the flag of the Nazi Party, Nazi Germany. This symbol is an ancient symbol. It originates in India as the Nazi claimed lineage from the Aryan. Under Hitler's rule, Germany quickly became a totalitarian state where nearly all aspects of life were controlled by the government. Totalitarianism, a form of government or political system that prohibits opposition parties, restricts individual opposition to the state and its claims, and exercise an extremely high degree of control over public and private life. It is regarded as the most extreme and complete form of authoritarianism. The American political system can be broken down into three categories. The center is the base. The U.S. Constitution is the foundation. It sits in the center of the scale. As you move left of the center, you have more state or government control. As you move right of the center or the U.S. Constitution, you have less state or government control. This is what the following terms represent. Left wing, left side of the aisle, leftist, equals left of the center, equals more government control. Political banners associated with the left side of the political spectrum. Left wing, Democrat Party, Social Democrat Socialism. This banner, in its root, originates from the 18th century, which will later become known as communism. Communism, fascism, authoritarianism, environmentalism, totalitarianism, eugenics, universalism, universal, globalism, progressive are all banners associated with the left side of the political spectrum, which represents more government control and regulation. This is what the following terms represent. Right wing, right side of the aisle, equal, right of center, less government control. Political banners associated with the right side of the political spectrum. Right wing, Republican Party, conservative, constitutional Republican, libertarian, capitalist. Again, the American political system can be broken down into three categories. The center is the base. The Constitution is the foundation and sits in the center of the spectrum or the scale. As you move left of the center or the U.S. Constitution, you have more state or government control and regulation. As you move right of the center or the U.S. Constitution, you have less state or government control. Here is a depiction of the American political structure on a scale. In the center, you have the U.S. Constitution. As you move left, you have more government control. As you move right, you have less government control, which eventually leads to anarchism. Therefore, we seek a center balance between the two extremes. Here is another depiction of the American political spectrum on a scale. In the middle, you have the conservative. The conservative seeks to conserve the U.S. Constitution. As you move to the left, you have more government control. Communism, socialism. The Nazi sits on the left, totalitarianism. As you go to the right of the center or the U.S. Constitution, you have less government, which eventually leads to anarchy. No government at all. This is commonly known as mob rule, the survival of the fittest. The extreme right often leads to the extreme left. In order to bring total government control, the extreme right is ultimately employed to destroy all existing government, therefore paving the way for total mob rule. Here is another depiction of the American political spectrum on a scale. In the middle, the center, sits the U.S. Constitution. As you move left, you see you have communism, fascism, liberalism, socialism. All sits on the left side of the scale and represents more state, government, control, and regulation. As you come to the right, as you can see, it represents less government control and regulation. The extreme right leads to anarchy, which is no government. Therefore, we seek a center balance. Here is another depiction. The United States Constitution sits in the center. As you move left, you have total government control. As you move to the right, you have less government control, which is anarchy, no government at all to the extreme, which leads to mob rule. Anarchy is often employed to bring about total government control. Many people we come across are confused by political jargon. They become disinterested, not out of ignorance. It is because politics is put across intentionally confusing. This is how the few maintain a monopoly and control over the laws. This is how the masses are manipulated. That results in voting against their own interests. It also results in not voting at all. The following is an example of how politics are intentionally put across to confuse and create disinterest out of the confusion. Here is a scale of the political spectrum that is taught in the schools and universities and propagated through mainstream media. If you notice, going to the left, government control, you have socialism and communism. If you look to the extreme right, less government control, it has fascism as right wing. There is where the confusion lies. Fascism, by its definition, is located on the left wing. 2, you see the Democrat Party is depicted as being in the center of the scale, when in actuality, the liberal, progressive, social democrat, socialist, all exist left, going toward more government control. This confusion sets up a false comparison by setting fascism as the opposite of communism and socialism. You have a false opposition because they are both the same. Political banners associated with the left side of the political spectrum. Left wing, Democrat Party, Social Democrat, Socialism, Communism, Fascism, Authoritarianism, Environmentalism, Totalitarianism, Eugenics, Universalism, Universal, Globalism, Progressive, all sit on the left side of the political spectrum. More government, more regulation over your life. Let's do definitions. Fascist. A political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of the fascisti, that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that stands for a centralized headed by a dictatorial leader, severe economic and social regimentation, and forcible suppression of opposition. Notice, centralized autocratic government and severe economic social regimentation is another way of saying centralized government, more government control and regulation over your life. Totalitarianism, centralized control by an autocratic authority. The political concept that the citizen should be totally subject to an absolute state authority. Here, centralized control, totally subject to an absolute state authority is the same as saying more government control and regulation over your life. Authoritarian or authoritarianism, relating to or favoring blind submission to authority, relating to or favoring a concentration of power in a leader or an elite, not constitutionally responsible to the people. Here, blind submission to authority and concentration of power is the same thing as saying centralized state control and regulation over your life. Communism, a theory or system of social organization based on the holding of all property in common, actual ownership being ascribed to the community as a whole or to the state. A system of social organization in which all economic and social activity is controlled by a totalitarian state, dominated by a single and self-perpetuating political party. The term Democrat Socialist or Social Democrat, Socialist, all preceded and gave birth to the term communism. When you see ascribed to the community as a whole or to the state, controlled by a totalitarian state, dominated by a single and self-perpetuating political party, is the same thing as centralized government, state control and regulation over your life. Here, again, this is where the confusion lies, and often confuse the people. When you look at this depiction of the political spectrum, this is the center. In the American system, communism, totalitarianism, socialism, all sits on the left side, more state control. But then, when you look here, you see fascism, authoritarianism, Nazi, the system of the Nazi in Germany, is on the right side of the scale. In the American political structure, all of this exists on the left wing. Therefore, oftentimes, the fascist is placed as the opposite of the socialist or communist. This false comparison often leaves people choosing false alternatives because they are both one and the same. Again, the American political system can be broken down into three categories. The center is the base. The Constitution is the foundation. It sits in the center. As you move left of the center or Constitution, you have more state or government control. As you move to the right of the center, you have less state or government control. Here is another depiction which is more accurate. You see, the conservative, it seeks to conserve the U.S. Constitution, which sits in the center. As you move left of the Constitution, you see you have liberals, communism, socialism, the Nazi Party, totalitarianism, all sit on the left side. When you go right of the Constitution to the extreme right, you have anarchy, no government at all, mob rule, survival of the fittest. This often leads to the extreme left. The extreme left and those who advocate total government control will often employ the bringing about of anarchy in order to establish total government control. Here is another depiction. Here you have the center, which is our Constitution, going left to its destination. You see you have communism and fascism. To the right you have anarchy, no government at all, mob rule. The total right, history shows, is often employed in order to bring about the extreme left. Communism, fascism, socialism, totalitarianism, authoritarian. Again, Nazi, true meaning. It is the banner given to a social system. It is not a person. It is a system. Nazi represented the National Socialist German Workers' Party, National Sozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or NSDAP. Nazi is a socialist. Under Hitler's rule, Germany quickly became a totalitarian state where nearly all aspects of life were controlled by the government. Again, is a depiction of the American political spectrum. You notice liberal, socialism, communism, Nazi Party, totalitarianism, censorship. They are all one and the same and exist on the left side of the scale. Political banners associated with the left side of the political spectrum. You have left wing, Democrat Party, Social Democrat Socialism. This banner, in its root, existed since the 18th century and would later become known as communism. Communism, fascism, authoritarianism, environmentalism, totalitarianism, eugenics, universalism, universal, global, progressive are all associated with the left side of the political spectrum, which represents state control and regulation over your life. In part 2 of this series, we will review the ideology of each side of the American political structure: the center, the left side, the right side. We will demonstrate how many are opposed to the Nazi system, often confused as a person or people as opposed to what it is, a political or governmental system, and at the same time affiliate themselves with the platform of the Nazi without even realizing it.